Hey everybody, this is Sheriff Tim Carter from Shenandoah County Sheriff, and today I have a special guest with me, the Sheriff of Fauquier County, Bob Mosier. Hey Sheriff, how you doing?
Hey Sheriff Carter, thank you for the invitation. You know, we're not too far apart. You know, you might be on the other side of the valley, but
that's right.
You know, working in law enforcement together, Shenandoah is pretty close to Fauquier.
Right, and I tell you, I drive through there pretty frequently when we're heading down south. Usually it's faster for me just to go out of the northern end of the county and head south through your county than it is go the other way, usually when I come down to Richmond area.
Well, just be careful. There are speed traps everywhere when you come through Fauquier. So
I'm
just
careful.
putting that out there.
Yeah, I'm careful everywhere. Yes, sir. Well, Sheriff Mosier, I think the one question that I think a lot of people were asking is what's important or what's happening in your county right now that's that maybe you want to mention or talk about?
Sure. Well, I mean, when you think about where we are from a national context, there are many different competing priorities. So one of the things that we've been very mindful about is making sure our directives have been updated to reflect accreditation, really, the accreditation standards. So accreditation has been important. We come up for reaccreditation next year, and so we
do too, actually. Yes,
we do
sir.
at the same time. So we had our initial accreditation, so this will be our first up, if you will, our second accreditation coming into it. So just working through those items on those checklists, basically, that they have. Yeah.
Right, and I know I'm not sure about you as far as how COVID impacted your office, and you're coming out of COVID at this point. I tell people and other sheriffs that I've mentioned that I think we're coming out of COVID, opening up with a vengeance right now. Well, we're down here in Williamsburg, and restaurants are packed. I think people are they're kind of tired of being locked down and cooped up and what have you, but we're coming out of that. I know we've had some, while we were in the whole COVID thing, I'm not sure about you, but we had some issues with staffing where if somebody's spouse got COVID, then you had to have the quarantine time, and didn't have a lot of officers or deputies that got it, but did have family members or exposures where they actually had to have time where they couldn't come in and affect anyone else or make sure they weren't infected. So I'm not sure if you wanted to address any of that's going on in Fauquier County now.
Yeah, so the COVID-19, but before I get into that piece of it, let me just touch base. Some of the things that are important that are going on in Fauquier is we're still combating the opioid crisis when you think about what's happening there. Also, the sale and distribution of illegal narcotics. So we are actively engaged in investigations. And, where Fauquier County is situated, and I know we've had this discussion before about the effectiveness of task force operations.
Right.
We're part of task forces in both the Blue Ridge area and then also in the Northern Virginia area as well, just by virtue of where Fauquier County sits. So we've had some substantial investigations that have taken place where we've taken major quantities of illegal narcotics off the street. And some of the things that we're even talking about here at the conference, like they mentioned earlier, butane honey oil, or BHO, this distilled version of THC, it's illegal. It's still going to be illegal, even with the changes in the law that take place in July. But we've had homicides over marijuana inside Fauquier County just in the past couple of years, 2002, 20, and 21. We've had some additional crime. So all that to say is that things haven't really slowed down from the law enforcement perspective. Even with COVID-19, there have been some things that have backed off, but then we're also dealing with the national increase in violent crime. Highest since 1966, I read in today's paper.
Right.
We're on par with violent crime across the country. And so we have not been spared that. So as we're getting prepared for this next round of what things look like for us going forward in the future, coming out of COVID, this is on my mind, quite frankly.
Right.
To being exposed to violent crime, our communities, and what we can do to combat that. And several things. I mean, partnerships in law enforcement, the way that we're interacting right now is an example. And then also our school resource officer program. I can't tell you how important that is. Relationships and partnerships with the school division and with kids that are in school, to feel that they can talk to their SROs and report information for school safety. So, I mean, the school safety piece of it, the opioid crisis, I mean, there's so many different things I could talk about, not to mention just regular traffic safety and the things that we are dealing with. And you already said it, coming out of the gate, talking about There are people that are driving that are road rage incidents. It's just there's some things that we have to make sure that we're paying very close attention to, and that's kind of like the short list of some of the things. So there you go. So sorry about that.
No, that's fine. And I tell you, I'm like you. I mean, we did not see a decrease in narcotics trafficking during I shouldn't say during the break, but during the time we were on lockdown dealing with COVID. We actually had, in my region and my community, we actually had more overdoses, and we're on track to have more overdose deaths. So I don't know why that is. All I know is that it didn't slow down. I think a lot of people think that I know businesses shut down and a lot of people were hurting and people were out of work and things like that. But from an EMS standpoint, from a law enforcement standpoint, an EMS standpoint, and a hospital care standpoint, all those people, fire, rescue, dispatch, law enforcement, hospital workers, they were still plugging along and still basically had a high operational tempo during all this time. So in other words, they didn't get a day off. They were still working. And sometimes they were working on short staffs because of the parameters we were under as far as having quarantine and things like that. There was one other thing. You mentioned the school resource officer program. We have a very supportive school board in Shenandoah County, a very supportive board of supervisors when it comes to school safety and school resource officers. And, I tell people those positions are not there. They're not behavioral specialists. Those positions are there to protect the children in those schools. They're there to protect the staff of those schools, those facilities, to keep them secure and safe. And I just think some places throughout the Commonwealth, maybe even throughout the country, have I personally think that they're maybe not running their school resource officer programs properly in my mind, but we look at those as basically the people that are protecting those facilities and the people within those facilities. And they're there as a resource. They're there to help school administrators. And that's what I think. If you have a good program and you got a good relationship with that school system, and those officers have good relationships with those school principals and administrators, that's a plus for that community. So I applaud you for doing that too.
Well, yeah, and if I can just say what it is we kind of view this in simple terms that we are guardians in our community. And
right.
It's really the role of the school resource officer, not only to be a guardian, but also for prevention and educational purposes as well.
Right.
So we look forward to being able to answer those questions or maybe help with the educational component on drug resistance and awareness, whatever that might be. In a school atmosphere, and we also have a very supportive school division and board of supervisors, and being able to work well. We have good government inside Fauquier County, and that's representative of the type of work that we're able to do. And I don't want you to think just because you're in Shenandoah or we're in Fauquier and we're in a predominantly rural environment that we cannot be or have the same problems as big city problems. We can.
Right.
And if you recall last year, one of our deputies, Jason Clark, he received a Virginia Sheriff's Association Deputy of the Year award.
I do recall that.
And that was for a narcotics investigation that, I kid you not, spread all the way to Riverside, California, and then also to New Hampshire and other places in the country, where by virtue of that investigation, that criminal investigation, working with our federal partners, resulted in the identification of over 300 deaths connected to one mail order product that was being sent out that had been done illegally and continued illegally. Those cases are now in the Eastern District of Virginia, U.S. District Court, and there's been some pleas that have already occurred. We expect more to come on that. But it's dangerous. It can hit home even in a rural environment. So just don't think that we're protected because we're rural. The nature of crime has changed. Cyber crime, this type of crime, but we're prepared for it. And quite frankly, it's through events like this at the Virginia Sheriff's Institute Conference that we meet other sheriffs and we exchange ideas about best practices in policing and different ideas to be able to serve our communities better.
Right. And I'll tell you, one of the things that you've hit on, I think this is my personal opinion, knowing what I know about local law enforcement in the Commonwealth of Virginia, I think, and knowing what I know about rural law enforcement in particular and peers of mine throughout the state, I think the communities are well served by their sheriffs and
Oh, no
the work
question.
the work that they do. Which kind of leads me into the next question. And we've had 2 special sessions with the General Assembly over the last year and a half, and 1 general session. Any comments about any of those impacts on your locality and what you're doing locally? I know, like, for example, one of the things that I hear consistently is the impact of training that some of these changes are making, and some of the training is actually having to be. I mean, you get the law, and it's like you better be training for it now because it's going to come into effect very soon. Another is accreditation. For example, on our end, we've operated with a part-time person in that position, and my Board of Supervisors approved a full-time position for this coming year. I think it's important, if you're going to stay on top of best practices and things like that within the Commonwealth, that you have someone who's there watching all the policies that are coming through, making sure that the agency is staying abreast of the policies and documenting that they're staying abreast of the policies, and training that they're staying abreast of the policies, et cetera. But there's a couple things that we're doing in reaction to some of those local impacts of special sessions. I'm not sure if you had any comments about any of those.
Well, I mean, the first thing is you have to look at the motivation for the legislation, and if there's a good reason for for the legislation, then by all means, let's sit down at the table and talk about it. But the sessions that have occurred in the past 12, 18 months, I don't think have actually incorporated a law enforcement seat at the table, if you will, on some of the things. And let me just talk about it in terms of one instance, and this is it's broad based, the opioid crisis. So.
Right.
We in Fauquier County went through great lengths working with our CSB to get a medically assisted treatment program in our jail, and also a behavioral assisted treatment program in our jail. That way, people that came into the criminal justice system, we would be able to offer them life-changing services, if you will.
Right.
Now, these are the services that are not available to everybody that's on the street. If you have insurance or you have a means, you can pay for treatment, inpatient treatment, things like this.
Right.
Typically, the people that we come in contact with don't have those resources. So we, again, went through great lengths to put this together, and it was working very well. And then along came Senate Bill 667, which changed all that, and it made that a change in law enforcement and the way that we do our job, that at the scene of an overdose, we can no longer make an arrest if we have somebody with felony drugs. So it could be fentanyl, it could be heroin, whatever it is. So now when we get there, we literally have to stand by, and there's nothing we can do from a law enforcement standpoint. I've had a sheriff tell me, and I think one of our neighboring jurisdictions, that he had people that had overdosed jumping out of the back of ambulances on the way to the hospital. There's no follow-up with these folks. So eventually you're going to see an increase in deaths related to overdoses. And we projected that. We had a meeting with the senator that patroned the bill and explained to her, and she never included law enforcement in that discussion in the beginning, but let me just say it this way. We predicted that there would be an increase in deaths in related to heroin and fentanyl overdoses. Now, we have no way to interact with them. Well, a lot of these folks don't get treatment unless they're compelled to do it.
Right.
And the only people that can compel them to do it is a judge. So getting them before the court. And we came up with a compromise piece of legislation that failed last session and in the special session. So more to come. We're going to watch how this is going to go. We're still going to continue to respond, and we're still going to continue to try to help the best that we can.
And I tell you, Sheriff, you bring up a good point. You know, one of the things that I've been very discouraged about, maybe even disappointed with, is it just seems like, and I've been doing this for a while. I think you've been doing this business for a while. To me, it just seems like over the last year and a half that these policies, these directives, these statutes that are coming out of Richmond, it doesn't seem to be a proper vetting. It just doesn't seem like that's happening. I mean, and I'm talking about the practical nature from what you're speaking to. I'm talking about the fiscal impact, what it does to a locality or requires them to do. There's a perception I have that's not being discussed. It's not being gone over very well, at least not in my opinion, what we're dealing with. And it just seems like we're just getting this ton of stuff pushed towards us, law enforcement. I'm speaking from law enforcement in particular, but I think other disciplines may feel the same way. But I know from our perspective or mine, you're getting this ton of stuff pushed towards you, and it's like you've got to now deal with it. And it would have been so much simpler and so much better, and to me, better government, good government, if you had some of that vetting done, some of those decisions made before the legislation got enacted. And I just feel like that's just the perception I have of what's happening right now. But that's Tim Carter, and I'm just a country sheriff. So I don't know what I'm talking about, but I see it a lot.
No, I think you are correct, because again, with Senate Bill 667, it was passed into law July a year ago, and of course, after it's passed into law, it's de facto. Now we have to address it. We have to work within those parameters, and then we made contact with the senator, with the patron of the legislation, and we went through an entire process by explaining all the potential things that could happen as a result, and here we are. More deaths in 2020 than been previously. So they're on the rise, and they're going to continue to rise. But my point being is exactly what you said, that at no time did anyone contact the law enforcement community to have a seat at the table to talk about these things, that we're going to have to deal with the impacts of it.
Right. And I tell you, Sheriff, I think, and I'm again only speaking from a Shenandoah County perspective, but I know the people that I work for, and I'm certain the people in Fauquier County feel the same way. They expect good government from their local officials and their elected officials, and I personally think they're disheartened when they see that these things are happening, and they start to question, well, why did that happen? And a lot of it is because I think some people are not listening, or some people are not talking or taking other people's opinions into effect when they make these decisions about legislation like you're talking about. But I think the public, me personally, I personally think it goes from urban areas to rural areas. They expect good government, and they expect those things to be done. But I'm afraid I don't see some of that happening right now. Now, you did mention a few minutes ago the benefit of coming to the Virginia Sheriff's Institute Conference. This is the first one we've had about a year and a half, and I'm not sure about you, but I really enjoy coming for a variety of reasons. One is it gets me the credit hours that I need to keep my certification, and I tell people when they're donating to the VSI, there's a direct impact on staff as far as getting that training, and that helps pay for the training that we're attending while we're here. But one of the other things I like, and I probably like it even more, me personally, I've been to enough Zoom meetings and go-to meetings right now for a lifetime. I really do like sitting down with other sheriffs and hearing about what they're dealing with and having that relationship with them. Just having that personal contact, it's invaluable to me. So I didn't know if you had any comments about the Virginia Sheriff's Institute Conference or any of the training that you're getting here while you're here this week.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate what I said earlier. It's a time for us to come together and learn from our colleagues, our other sheriffs, what they've encountered across the Commonwealth, and be able to work together to come up with solutions. So the good thing is it's not in a vacuum. The information that's actually put together is something that is usable.
Right.
And that's, quite frankly, what we're able to glean from it. Not to mention just having the time to sit down and share a meal together. Right.
Exactly.
And talk about the things that are happening on the home front, so to speak, and then to be able to bring those ideas back and implement them if appropriate for our community and that kind of thing. You couldn't find a better group of professionals and sheriffs to get together and talk about things. And think about it from this perspective, that being a sheriff, being an elected sheriff, is the closest form of community policing that you'll ever find.
Right.
Because if we're not connected to our communities, well, we might as well go do something else.
Right.
And right now, we're connected, and we're connected not only to our community, but also to other sheriffs that have the same drive and desire and responsibility as guardians in their communities as well.
Right. And we work for the people. That's what we work for. Yes, sir. Well, Sheriff Mosier, is there anything I've neglected to ask you, or anything you wanted to add today before we end our podcast today?
No, you need to make it over the mountain and come and visit sometime. I'll say it that way. So stop by the next time you're riding through, and we'll look forward to catching up. And really, I'm glad you're doing this series. It'll become a history record for you for the Shenandoah County Sheriff's Office, and now we're part of history together. So
Yes, sir.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, again, thank you. This has been my special guest today has been Bob Mosier, the Sheriff of Fauquier County, and thanks for spending a few minutes of your time with me today, Sheriff. For those of my listeners, please follow us on YouTube at Timothy C. Carter. Make sure you like smash that like button, and again, follow us here on The Source. Thanks again for following us, and talk to you later. Thanks,
Take care.
Sheriff.